Hi reading group, I hope you guys are doing well. Our topic for this week is going to be ESL. And as a reminder and kind of thinking about leading up to the topic for this week, so we started first off just thinking about challenges to text and comprehension. We got into some overall strategies to help all students comprehend, and then for the last couple of weeks we've been focusing on some specific needs and some specific barriers. So thinking about students who may struggle to comprehend the text or who read at a lower reading level, students who may be less interested in reading the text and strategies for addressing that. And now we're getting into a very specific demographic of students, which are ESL students. Now, this is a topic that for most of you, you probably do not know very much about unless you're getting an ESL endorsement here at Olivet, which we do offer. So let me know if you want to know more information about that. But this is a group of students that you probably have not had very much experience with or not much familiarity with. And even with reading a couple textbook chapters and looking at some resources, of course, it's not like you're going to be an ESL expert. However, the goal with talking about ESL students in this class is to give you a basic understanding of the needs of those students and the uniquenesses that they bring to the classroom, how to support them in general. And then what are some of those strategies that you can use within your content area classroom to support these students? Now, you're going to notice that a lot of these strategies that we're going through are strategies that are also going to help other students too, right? So ESL experts often say that strategies that are good for ESL students are good for all students. And so you're going to notice some overlap with strategies that we talked about that would better interest and engage students. And then strategies that would help with students who are reading at a lower level because English is not these students' first language. In addition to that, and thinking about the acronym ESL and calling the students English as second language, this is a very common acronym and very common language to refer to this group of students. However, since kind of like the start of using this language, there has been some debate about whether or not this is the most appropriate way to talk about this group of students, because we're assuming that this is their second language when we know that for some students, they may be learning English as their third, fourth, or fifth, or whatever language. And so ESL is commonly used, but you'll also see acronyms such as EAL, English as Additional Language, EL, English Learners, or ELL, English Language Learners. And your textbook talks about that a little bit, but a lot of the language in the textbooks and in the programs are still ESL, which may end up changing in the future. We'll have to see. So for this week, as usual, you guys will be reading out of the two different textbook chapters. For those of you who are math or music, those chapters are posted in Canvas, so you can get to them there. For the first chapter in the Beers text, they do a really good job of thinking more holistically about how we can support this group of students and make them feel welcomed and appreciated in our classrooms. They talk about creating an environment of cultural harmony, for example, and the chapter is essentially an interview with 3 ESL experts. So there's just all different kinds of strategies included, and you get the different takes on this from different experts. You also have researchers who have worked with students who speak, whose first language is from a variety of backgrounds. So students who speak maybe Spanish as their first language, Chinese as their first language. And so you get a little bit more just about kind of the nuances of language, which includes additional barriers kind of depending on what those are, depending on what the student's first language is. For the Hinchman chapter, also has several good strategies in thinking about language and literacy supports to help us make content area strategies. And that's what you guys are going to be doing for your assignment this week, which I'll talk more about in just a minute. In addition to that, as always, I try to provide some extra resources. And part of the reason for this is that, yes, you're going to be reviewing these this week. It helps just give like overall some good strategies that you can use. But these are also always good links for you to bookmark so that when you get into your field experience and student teaching and then teaching, there's strategies and resources that you can come back to when you need them. And you may be thinking like, oh, I don't have an interest in working with this demographic of students specifically. However, given the changing demographics in our country, there's a very good likelihood that you will work with students who don't speak English as their first language. And so these are great strategies for you to be able to come back to. There are also school districts, especially if you're in near around a city, where you will have to have an ESL endorsement to be considered for them to hire because of the high number of students who don't speak English as their first language. So as usual, you guys will be also participating in the weekly discussions, so then make sure that you both post by Thursday and respond by Sunday as usual. And then for the assignment for this week, as I said, you are going to be using the examples from the Hinchman text, and it will be really helpful. You'll initially read this, but it will be helpful for you to use this and reference this as you go through the assignment so you can understand what you're going to be doing. They give an example within here for a history classroom, so you can use that. And then I'm also going to give you a couple of other examples in just a minute. But basically what you're going to be doing is coming up with a content objective. So this may be a standard in your area. That's what I've done for the samples that I've come up with. But it may also just be an objective, something that you know you're going to be doing in your content area. So for example, in an English classroom, that may be something like analyzing a poem or identifying literary devices. Those are just common objectives that we're going to be doing in an English class. So you may come up with an overall objective that you know is appropriate for your content area. Or if you want to use your standards, you're welcome to start with standard. So you're going to be using a content objective, and then you're going to be thinking for language literacy objectives is what students are going to be doing in terms of reading, writing, speaking, and listening to support them in being able to meet their content objective. Beyond that, then you're going to be coming up with a list of activities that they're going to be doing. So how might you introduce this lesson? What are some of the supports that you're going to use throughout the lesson? And then how you might go about doing so, and what is the rationale behind why you're using the strategy that you're using. You see here that I also went through and listed several different examples. The textbooks both come up with all different ideas for how you can best support, what strategies that you can use to support students to meet their content objective, and then also the language and literacy objectives, which help support the content objective. And so these are ones that I've just taken notes on throughout the textbooks, but you don't have to use these. These are just kind of a reminder, a place to sum up what you guys read in the text. So to give you a couple of other examples, considering these are some of the examples we're going to look at together for those of you who are taking the class in person. So if I'm thinking about this from a health perspective, right? So those of you who are PE and health, one of your standards for high school students is that they have to design and implement a personal fitness program. So by the end of the week, students have to be able to design their own personal fitness program. So now I'm thinking about the language and literacy demands in order to do this. What are they going to have to be able to do when it comes to language and literacy? What are they going to need to read, write, talk about in order to be able to meet this? So the first thing that I'm thinking about here is that if I'm going to design and implement a personal fitness program, I need to know what this looks like, and how do I even create something like this? So this may be something like having students look at a couple of different websites where they just learn more about how do I design and implement a personal fitness program. So for all students, that may look like them going through and looking at the website and mining for information, and they may be able to just take notes on what should be included. For my students who are ESL, so some of those ESL supports are that these students may need to use sentence starters. So that maybe looks something like, the first thing I need to do to design my fitness program is, and then they're going to be filling in the blank. So that's going to make it a little bit easier for them. This may also be using a video. So it's not just that they're looking at all of this text, but they're also going to use or find videos that are going to show them how to design this. So I'm probably going to start them off, give them some information about where to go to find how to do this, and I'm going to add those supports for ESL students. After that, then for other students, I'm going to say maybe we're going to look at some sample ones. So for students in general, if I say what are some characteristics of sample ones, what are you noticing about fitness programs of professional athletes, for example. But then for our ESL students, a way that I may support that is I may have them create something like a graphic organizer where they're going to go through and notice similarities and differences to personal fitness programs for different professional athletes. That could also be another support here, could be having them choose athletes in their country of origin. And so maybe students are looking at professional athletes across the world, globally, instead of just focusing on athletes within the United States. So that may be another support system. So you kind of get the idea here that they're overall designing and implementing a personal fitness program. So some of those language supports are that I'm supporting students in being able to summarize what's on the website, and that they need to use a graphic organizer in order to be able to design this personal fitness program. So thinking of the same idea with middle school science, so our students, as a part of their standards, have to construct and present arguments using evidence to support a claim about gravitational interactions. So for students to really construct and present arguments, some of the supports I'm thinking that they may need is that they're first going to have to be able to read about what these arguments even are. And so for my students, I may have them go through and they may need to identify arguments about gravitational interactions. So I may have students doing an annotation activity where they're going to be going through with a highlighter and identifying first the different arguments and then going through with a different highlighter and noting evidence. Then students may take this information from the original text and I may have them again kind of plug it into a graphic organizer or a note sheet or a guide sheet so that they're going to go through and identify what those claims are, and then what is the textual evidence used to support it. So again, thinking about what are the language and literacy demands and supports, and then what can I do for activities so that my ESL students are going to be able to do this well. So what are those added things and strategies that I'm going to be doing? These students are also, I've noticed, they're going to be presenting these different arguments. And so this may be something like for students who don't speak English as their first language, it may be extra steps where they are able to maybe first present to a small group, right? Because we want them to be confident and feel like they're really capable to speak. And so for all of our students, we may say, okay, you're going to have to be doing some kind of presentation with this. But especially for our ESL students, maybe they're planning their presentation first in their first language. And maybe I'm going to, again, use sentence starters or something to kind of help guide them in creating an effective presentation. And then I'm going to have them practice this with a smaller group and receive feedback before they're going to get up in front of the class. This may also be doing something like offering a video option, right? So for the students who are going to be especially nervous to talk out loud in class because they aren't as proficient with English, and so that makes them nervous, it may be something like giving some choice. So for all of your students, right, you want to make sure that you're offering this to all of your students, but maybe they have the option instead to do a video so that they have time to plan it, think about it, write it down so that they don't feel uncomfortable in front of their classmates. So then the last example may be, these are our world languages standards, and so Spanish specifically, that's one of our programs. And so, for students to be able to understand the main idea and some piece of information, unfamiliar topics from sentences, series of connected sentences within text that are spoken, written, or signed. So again, if I'm thinking about this and I want them to be able to understand the main idea and pieces of information from sentences, I may help them by doing some of those same activities where they're going to be going through and they're going to be annotating. Maybe they're going to be marking things that they don't understand. Maybe I'm going to use sentence starters with them where I'm going to, use sentences that have the same kind of construction when it comes to noun, verb, adjective, in order to help them to best understand the information that's written in another language. I may also have them kind of thinking about some of these other ESL strategies. I may be having them talk with some of their classmates to help them to be able to do so. And I may be even choosing texts that have some different cultural differences. Again, just to help students to better understand some of those different cultural backgrounds that affect different kinds of texts. And so those are just some ideas that I'm just kind of brainstorming for your own content areas, of course. You may have different standards, different outcomes. but you get the idea what I'm talking about, that you're thinking about the content standards, you're thinking about supports for language specifically in order to help them to meet these. Tell me what some of the activities that you're going to be doing in order to help them to do so, and then a brief rationale of why you're including those strategies, how they're going to best help ESL students. As always, reach out if you guys do have any questions or anything. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Thanks.